Dragon Emperor Sun Chapter 451 to Chapter 460. Neither Bai Zhantang nor Qin Feng noticed how David killed that Zhongzhen, but to be able to shoot Zhongzhen to death in such a short period of time, the strength of David can be imagined. Let's work together, kill this kid first, and then talk about UPI. Seeing that Zhongzhen was dead, Qin Feng frowned and said to Bai Zhantang. He was planning to join hands with Bai Zhantang to kill David. But who knew that Bai Zhantang suddenly pulled back and clasped his fist at David. Brother Chen, I didn't mean to offend you. I'm here to apologize. Bai Zhantang's sudden withdrawal put Qin Feng in an embarrassing position. He knew very well that Bai Zhantang was going to kill with a knife. If he could kill David, Bai Zhantang would definitely snatch the jade pendant from him, but if they were killed by David, then David will also be exhausted and seriously injured, and Bai Zhantang will still shoot. You coward! Qin Feng looked at Bai Zhantang, gritted his teeth and scolded, and then said to his subordinate, let's go together, kill this kid first, we're taking jade pendant. Hey, watch that woman, don't let her run away. Qin Feng roared angrily, and led someone directly to David, leaving Bai Zhantang alone. Linger, look at Sonia. David gave Sonia to Gu Linger to support. At this time, when the Atta saw David let Sonia go, his eyes flashed coldly, and he walked towards Sonia from one side. Court death. David's face turned cold, and he slapped that Atta with a palm. David, who is already in the foundation building stage, doesn't care about any Niajing master at all. Seeing this, Atta didn't fight with David, he wanted to slip back on one side of his body. David is alone, and there are several of them. As long as David is not paying attention, they can take Sonia away. But just as Atta's body stepped back, he suddenly felt a flower in front of him, and then David disappeared. Panic flashed in Atta's eyes, and he stepped back faster, but he hit something with a bang. When Atta looked back, he was dumbfounded. He realized that he had bumped into David. I don't know when, David actually came behind him. Bang! David slapped Atta's head with his palm and smashed his head to pieces. After killing that Atta, David's figure did not stop at all, and instantly met Qin Feng and his men. David's figure is like a whirlwind, constantly shuttling between Qin Feng and his men, and there will be screams from time to time. When David's figure stopped, the men brought by Qin Feng were already lying on the ground, all of them looked pained and struggled fiercely, but they didn't live long. The scene was deadly silent, and no one dared to speak. They were all masters of masters, and they would die like this. Run! Seeing this, Qin Feng turned around and was about to run. David's strength is much stronger than he imagined. But Qin Feng just turned around, David's body swayed, he chased after him, kicked Qin Feng's back, and then stepped on Qin Feng's head. David, you can't kill me. I'm from the Qin family. If you kill me, the Qin family won't let you go even if they chase the ends of the earth. With panic flashing in Qin Feng's eyes, he threatened David. I hate people threatening me the most. David said coldly, the strength on his feet increased a bit. Qin Feng panicked and hurriedly shouted to the crowd, I am the young master of the Qin family in Jingjing. If any of you can save me, my Qin family will definitely thank you. Everyone knows that if you follow the Qin family in the capital, you will definitely rise to the top, but with the strength of David, who would dare to rescue him? Seeing that no one spoke, Qin Feng panicked even more, Bai Zhantang, save me, if you save me, my Qin family can obey your Bai family's dispatch. Qin Feng was following Bai Zhantang for help. At this time, Qin Feng's head had already fallen into the ground halfway. David was trying so hard that Qin Feng's head would be broken. Bai Zhantang's expression changed, but he didn't move or speak. If no one saves you, then I'll send you on your way. David said coldly. No, no, Qin Feng shouted. Suddenly he thought of Gu Linger, so he said loudly, Linger, Linger save me, for the sake of our love, save me. My life, I liked you, I really liked you at the time, but I was forced by my family to break off with you, and then got engaged to Bai Manli of the Bai family, please save me. Gulinger looked at Qin Feng like that, her body trembled slightly, her eyes were full of tears, she really loved him. At that time Gulinger thought she had found true love, found Prince Charming, but who knew she had suffered the worst injury. David heard that Qin Feng dared to mention this matter. He was originally angry for Gulinger, but this Qin Feng dared to say that David was even more angry. You scumbag, go to H3LL. David shouted angrily, and he raised his foot to step on it. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Gulinger shouted. David looked back at Gulinger in surprise. Gulinger came over, glanced at Qin Feng helplessly, and then said to David, David, can you spare his life? Linger, did this scumbag hurt you? David didn't understand why Gulinger still pleaded for Qin Feng. Spare his life, after all, I loved him, this is a kind of relief I gave myself, I save his life, and it will never be related again. Tears flowed out of Gulinger's eyes, and it could be seen how much Gulinger once loved Qin Feng. David retracted his foot, sighed helplessly, and then said to Qin Feng, go away, and next time, no one will intercede for you again. Qin Feng let out a long breath, then got up and ran away without looking back, not even looking at Gulinger. After Qin Feng ran away, David looked at Bai Zhantang and said coldly, if you want to take advantage of my exhaustion, you can do it now. Feeling David's gaze, Bai Zhantang's heart trembled slightly, and after his face changed, he showed a smile, Brother Chen, I just said it was a misunderstanding, you and I have no grievances, how can I shoot you? David sneered, this jade pendant is what you are looking for, don't you want to take it back? And the pill formula on me, don't you want it? Bai Zhantang frowned, he really didn't understand, how did David know that he was rushing towards this jade pendant? Could it be that it was David who rescued Yin Susu one night? Thinking of this, Bai Zhantang instantly understood that with David's ability, he could indeed rescue Yin Susu from their eyes without a sound. Since the thing is in Brother Chen's hands, it's naturally Brother Chen's, why would I want it, and that pill recipe, Brother Chen doesn't want to take action, so I can only regret it, I won't do strong buying and selling things. Bai Zhantang could only squeeze out a smile and said against his will. David looked at Bai Zhantang and said with a look of disdain, you don't do things like buying or selling by force, but I will. Remember what I said, send me all the medicinal materials in the Yaoangfu to the provincial capital. Or I'll destroy the Medicine King's mansion. After David finished speaking, he didn't care about Bai Zhantang's hideous appearance, turned around and pulled Sonia away. Gulinger and Wu Xi followed closely, and everyone else left one after another. What happened today really shocked them too much. Second young master. Sun Simiao looked at Bai Zhantang and said, what should we do? Let's delay for a few days, I'll go back to the family to discuss it. After Bai Zhantang finished speaking, he left with his subordinates. David took Sonia and the others back to the provincial capital. David, who had entered the foundation building stage, had higher and higher requirements for spiritual energy, but the rapid improvement of his strength also made him excited. Today, he killed a few masters as soon as he made a move. If it was in the Qi refining period, it would not be possible at all. Even if he fought with Zhang Zhengzhong, David took some effort at that time. If he was fighting with Zhang Zhengzhong at this time, David could just crush him to death without giving him the slightest chance to fight back. Mr. Chen, should we send someone to secretly monitor the actions of Yaoangfu? I guess they won't hand over the medicinal materials easily. Qi Feng rushed over immediately after David came back. Lin Tianhe followed Qi Feng to tell what happened in Tianfeng town. Qi Feng was also shocked at the time, after all, David's strength is unfathomable, growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. No, I hope they don't hand over the medicinal materials. What I want will not be as simple as medicinal materials, but the entire Medicine King's mansion. David smiled coldly, with endless greed in his eyes. If he wants to improve his own strength, David must rely on a large amount of elixir. As long as the medicinal materials from the Yeoongfu are helpful to David, they are limited. David wants the entire Yeoongfu in the future. Let Yeoongfu only deliver elixir to himself. But those 100-year-old elixir are limited after all, they can't be endless, and there will always be a day when they are exhausted. Looks like it's time to go to Mount Hung and see if there are any spiritual stones there. David thought to himself. If there is a spiritual stone in Hung Shan, David can stay in Hung Shan directly to practice. David contacted Wudong and told him to go to Hung Shan early tomorrow morning. Sonia now has a jade pendant to protect her body. David is still relatively relieved. The two masters have no way to get close. It seems that this jade pendant is indeed a treasure. When night fell, everyone fell asleep, and Tianfeng town also changed temporarily because of the martial arts gathering. Everyone left and became deserted. On the streets of Tianfeng town, 4 old men in black robes and white beards walked quietly. The 4 of them walked very slowly, but they took a long distance with each step. The individual came to an end in an instant. These 4 old men are the 4 elders of Swanya Valley. These 4 elders went straight to the arena, and then divided their labor and cooperated, each performing their duties, just like detectives investigating a case, constantly checking the footprints on the ground, and the big human-shaped pit on the arena that was smashed by Zhongjend. One of the elders took out a cloth pocket, then put his hand in, took out a handful of silver powder, and sprinkled it in the air. In an instant, a silver light flashed, and there were shadows in the air. The shadows were still moving, like a fast-forward 3D movie, and each character was very real. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be an image of David fighting a few grandmasters, but the image was very short, disappearing after only a few seconds, and the scene fell into darkness again. "Brother, can you see what kind of strength this kid is?" the elder who sprinkled silver powder asked. The first elder shook his head. "I can't see through, killing these masters of internal strength so easily. This kid is afraid that he has reached the peak of masters of internal strength, or the strength of the masters of internal strength, but I can't feel the slightest bit from here." Master's breath. "Big brother, judging from the big pit in this arena, that kid must have reached the strength of a great master, otherwise Zhongjend would not have died tragically," the elder who was investigating on the ring also said. "Second brother, the eldest brother has the sharpest nose. If there is a great master to use force here, the eldest brother will definitely be able to feel the breath," the elder who sprinkled gold dust retorted. This time, everyone fell into contemplation, and things seemed to be in a dead end. Could this kid not be a warrior, but a warlock like us? The elder who sprinkled gold dust suddenly lit up in front of his eyes. Impossible. It is impossible for a superb warlock to have such a close combat ability. You must know that we use all techniques. With physical strength alone, who of you can compete with the master of internal strength? The elder immediately retorted. Everyone fell into a dead silence again, and everyone frowned. This incident made them feel that they had no way to start. "Forget it, let's go back and report to the Valley Master. This David is too strong, we still have to take a long-term plan." After a moment of contemplation, the first elder waved his hand and said. The other 3 nodded, and then disappeared into the darkness in an instant. No one could have imagined that someone had been here before. The next morning, Wudong came early to wait for David. David followed Sonia to explain a few rounds and was ready to set off with Wudong. "This time I just went to Hung Shan for a simple exploration, so I won't go there for many days, and I didn't bring much stuff." But just as David was about to leave, the phone suddenly rang. David saw that his mother was calling, so he quickly connected the phone. "Mom!" After David answered the phone, he shouted happily. He hasn't called his parents in the past few days, and David blames himself after thinking about it. Hey! Barbara responded happily when she heard David calling her, and then said, David, have you been busy lately? Your second aunt's cousin will get married in a few days. Do you have time to go back to your hometown? Yingxia gets married. David was surprised. Mom, how old is Yingxia to get married? I'm 19, I no longer go to school, I'm not young. Barbara said. David was speechless for a while. This is how it is in the countryside. As long as children don't go to school, they will arrange marriage, especially girls. It stands to reason that Chen Yingxia's age is in her youth. When she was in college, she was going to marry and have children now. Mom, David didn't know how to tell Barbara that he was about to go to Mount Hung and had no time at all. Barbara on the other end of the phone may have heard something, sighed slightly, and then said, It's all right, if you don't have time, I'll tell your second aunt and the others, you're busy. Barbara's voice became smaller and smaller, and finally there was no voice, but the phone did not hang up. David can feel Barbara's heart at this moment. Since he was imprisoned, his father's job has disappeared, and his family's conditions have plummeted. Barbara has a very strong temper. It turns out that in her old family, she has a wide range of connections and popularity. Barbara called David this time and asked him to go back to his hometown. There must be something to show off. It happened to take advantage of Chen Yingxia's wedding to show off David with relatives and friends. Although Barbara doesn't know what David is doing now, since Chen Baoqiang's family was humiliated in the hotel, and even fired from public office, Barbara knew that David was capable. Mom, I'm fine, I'll rush back to my hometown today, don't worry. David hurriedly spoke to the phone. Hearing David's words, Barbara got excited. Okay, when you get home, I'll make sauerkraut dumplings for you, you've loved them since you were a child. By the way, don't forget to ask Sonia to come too, you should meet others. Relatives. David smiled, he knew that Barbara wanted him to take Sonia with him to show off in front of his relatives, so he nodded and said, No problem, I'll go tell her now. Well, I'm waiting for you. After Barbara finished speaking, she hung up the phone. I have something to do. I won't go to Hungshan for the time being, but you need to buy more of the rough stones of Hungshan. Hanging up the phone, David said to Wu Dong. Wu Dong nodded, Okay, I will go to Hungshan myself to urge the mining of some rough stones. After Wu Dong left, David followed Sonia to tell the story again. Sonia was also reasonable. Although she knew that the conditions in the countryside were very difficult, Sonia agreed. The two drove directly to David's hometown. David's hometown is in a rural area in Horindal. It was originally a small village, but after rapid development, it has changed a lot now. When David went back, he saw that every house had a big demolition word written on it. It should be demolished here. At that time, David's second uncle, Chen Baoqiang, wanted his ancestral house because of the demolition and development. Just after entering the village, some children were running wildly on the street. David didn't know any of them, he hadn't come back for several years. Second uncle, third aunt, you rest. Not long after entering the village, there were some old men and women sitting beside a tidy road. David hurriedly rolled down the car window and said, David still knows these people. After all, he grew up here since he was a child. It was not until after graduating from junior high school that David went to the city because of his father Chen Baoqiang's job transfer. Seeing David talking, several old men and women looked over, and soon a middle-aged woman recognized David and said, Isn't this David? Didn't you go to jail? When did you come out? Are you driving a big Mercedes as soon as you come out? The middle-aged woman looked at the car that David drove and said. David smiled awkwardly, Third aunt, I just came out not long ago. Oh, you came back to your cousin's wedding, right? I can tell you that Yingxia is very good now, her husband is a big boss, especially rich, you just come back and talk about it, maybe I can find it for you. Good job, let's go. The middle-aged woman waved her hand and said. David nodded, rolled up the car window and continued to drive forward, then looked at Sonia with an embarrassed expression. Rural women are just like this, their mouths are open, but their hearts are not bad. When I was a child, my third aunt often secretly boiled eggs for me. Eat. Sonia just smiled and didn't speak. She might not understand the way rural people speak. Soon, David parked the car in front of a small yard. The yard was not big, but very clean. The 5 brick houses were all newly painted. This is David's hometown. The house is tidied up. Dad, Mom. As soon as he got out of the car, David shouted loudly. Looking at the brick building in front of him, David's thoughts suddenly returned to his childhood when he shouted parents. He always remembered that the first thing he did when he got home from school was to call his parents, then threw his school bag into the yard, turned around and ran to play. David, are you back? Barbara happily ran out of the room. Auntie. After seeing Barbara, Sonia shouted with a slight smile. Oh, Sonia is here, hurry up and sit in the room. When Barbara saw that Sonia was really here, she was so happy that she almost jumped up. She originally thought that a young lady like Sonia would not like to come to the countryside in such a dirty and messy environment. When she finished the phone call, Barbara was still uneasy, wondering if Sonia would come. Now she sees Sonia coming. Barbara was overjoyed. Where's my dad? David asked Barbara. Go to your second aunt's house and see if I can help. Barbara said. This is the case in the countryside. If there is a happy event, everyone should help out together, because second aunt David is also from Chinjia village, a village, so it is even more necessary to help. Entering the room, Barbara greeted Sonia, which made Sonia somewhat restrained, while David turned around several rooms, and his heart was full of memories. David, this house will be demolished soon. If you can take a look at it, it's a good idea. After it's demolished, the whole village doesn't know where to go. Barbara saw David walking around in various rooms, so she sighed and said. Mom, isn't the demolition a resettlement house? David was taken aback and asked Barbara. Who arranged for you? Don't think about that kind of beauty. There is no rental subsidy. The ancestors in the village have lived here for generations. Now that the demolition has been demolished, the family has only 100,000 demolition funds, and other villages have less, but there is no place to justify it. Go, your dad and I just cleaned up the house, we spent a lot of money, we didn't expect it to be demolished so soon. Barbara looked very lonely. Mom, the house is demolished. You and my dad will go back to Horindal to live. Anyway, the house in Pine Bay has been vacant, and I don't have time to live there. David comforted Barbara. Barbara glanced at David. David, let me tell you, although Sonia's family is rich and can lend you the big house, but you can't do nothing, Sonia will follow you when the time comes. You can't keep spending people's money, can you? You're a man. Auntie, you misunderstood, in fact. Mom, I know, I will definitely do a good job. David interrupted Sonia directly and did not let her continue. It's just that Sonia doesn't dislike our family. You must treat others well. If I know that you have done something wrong to Sonia, I will not recognize you as a son. Barbara liked Sonia very much. Feel free to exhort David. She is a rich lady, doesn't dislike their poor family, and has a good personality. This kind of girl is really hard to find. Auntie, David is very good to me. If he dares to apologize to me, I will pull his ears. Sonia smiled and followed Barbara. Yes, pull him hard, then tell your aunt, and aunt will pull his ears for you too. Barbara also said with a smile. Mom, I'm still not your son, you guys are bullying me together. David was speechless for a while, but his heart was full of happiness. Ha ha ha. Sonia looked at David like that, and laughed. Brother David, Brother David. There is a girl's voice outside calling David. As soon as David heard the voice, he knew it was Chen Yingxia, so he ran out. Chen Yingxia is a few years younger than David, and the two families are in the same village, so Chen Yingxia has been following David like a follower since he was a child, and in order to protect Chen Yingxia, David often fights with people. The relationship between the two brothers and sisters very good. It's just that I haven't seen each other for many years, but David really misses this cousin. When David ran out of the room, he saw a tall girl who was over 1.7 meters tall, with a ponytail tied on her head and two shallow dimples when she smiled. Yingxia. David called tentatively. Brother David, don't you know me? Chen Yingxia smiled. I really don't dare to recognize you, you are growing too fast, you are as tall as me. David circled around Chen Yingxia in surprise, and then compared his head again. The two have not seen each other for 4 or 5 years. Back then, Chen Yingxia was just a little girl from the 14th 5-year plan, but now she's a big girl. It's you who grows slowly, and I'll surpass you in 2 years. Chen Yingxia raised her head and said, I just heard from the third aunt at the village entrance that you're back. You bought the big Mercedes outside, right? Friends? David said with a smile. This car belongs to Sonia, and David did not buy a car himself, because both Sonia and Lin Tianhu have cars, and there are quite a few, so David has no shortage of cars to drive. Oh! Chen Yingxia snorted, and then asked, I heard the third aunt say that you brought a very beautiful girl here. Is that your girlfriend? David smiled and nodded. This rural woman's ability to spread news is probably faster than the internet. Where? Take me to meet you. Chen Yingxia took David and walked towards the house. As soon as she entered the door, she was greeted by Barbara and Sonia, who were about to come out to meet her. Auntie! Chen Yingxia shouted after Barbara. Yingxia, you are getting married soon, why are you still running around? Barbara asked Chen Yingxia. There are too many people in the family and it's too noisy, so I ran out to get some air. After Chen Yingxia finished speaking, she looked at Sonia beside Barbara and said with a look of surprise, this is my brother David's girlfriend, right? It's so beautiful, like a fairy. Hearing what Chen Yingxia said, Sonia's face immediately turned red, but her heart was beautiful. My name is Sonia Su. Sonia stretched out her hand and said. Sister-in-law, my name is Chen Yingxia. Chen Yingxia hurriedly reached out and shook hands with Sonia. Okay, let's go talk in the house, I'll go to Yingxia's house to see. After Barbara finished speaking, she left. Several people returned to the house. Chen Yingxia's eyes kept on Sonia, but she felt a little embarrassed to see Sonia. Yingxia, what are you always looking at? David hurriedly reminded Chen Yingxia. I don't think my sister-in-law's outfit is cheap. They are all famous brands, and the earrings are Cartier. They are very expensive. Chen Yingxia said enviously, Sister-in-law, what does your family do? Sonia didn't expect that the little girl Chen Yingxia was quite knowledgeable, and smiled lightly, doing some small business. After finishing speaking, Sonia took off the earrings. Yingxia, your brother and I arrived in a hurry, and we didn't buy you any gifts. If you like these earrings, then give them to you. Chen Yingxia waved her hand hastily, and she stepped back in fright and said, Sister-in-law, this is too precious, I don't dare to ask for it. What's so precious? It's my sister-in-law's intention. Sonia said, pulling Chen Yingxia to put it on him directly, you look so good looking, and you will look even better when you wear a wedding dress when you get married. When Sonia talked about marriage, Chen Yingxia's original smile began to dim, and she seemed a little worried. Yingxia, you're just 19, why didn't you go to school and you're getting married? You haven't even gone to university, and you won't be educated in the future, so it's hard to get a foothold in society. David asked Chen Yingxia. David's question seemed to have touched Chen Yingxia's pain point. His eyes turned red all of a sudden, and he started crying. This shocked David. He didn't expect Chen Yingxia to cry when he said casually. Sonia also hurriedly comforted Chen Yingxia. Yingxia, your brother just said it casually, ignore him. Woohoo! As soon as Sonia said that, Chen Yingxia cried even more, and cried directly on Sonia's shoulder. After crying for a while and calming down, Chen Yingxia said, Sister-in-law, I'm not complaining about my brother saying that I actually don't want to get married, I want to go to school, but I can't help it. Chen Yingxia was wronged like a child at this time, which made people feel very distressed. When David and Sonia heard it, they were all slightly taken aback. What kind of society is this? Is there still forced marriage? Yingxia, what's going on? David frowned slightly. Brother David, forget it, it's useless to tell you, it's all like this, I've seen it. Chen Yingxia wiped away her tears and squeezed out a smile. Yingxia, tell me, I will definitely be able to help you, David said anxiously. Yingxia, you said, I believe we can help you. Sonia also said to Chen Yingxia. Chen Yingxia looked at Sonia, then nodded and said, Brother David, do you remember that Chen Guzi? Of course I remember, isn't it the guy who didn't go to school very early and collected protection fees at the school gate all day long? This kid even kicked me back then. David nodded and said. I just married him. Chen Yingxia lowered her head and bit her lip. What? David raised his voice all of a sudden, his eyes widened, that Chen Guzi is a gangster who hasn't graduated from junior high school, how could Arai and the others let you marry him? Although Sonia doesn't know this Chen Guzi, she is not a good person when she hears it, and she looks at Chen Yingxia suspiciously. Chen Yingxia's eyes reddened, she started to cry again, and began to talk slowly to David. When David finished listening, the whole person's face became extremely blue, and with a fierce shot, a solid wood table was instantly shattered. This Chen Guzi is so abominable, he's not a human being. Sonia is also angry. It turned out that Chen Guzi was always a gangster, and later became famous in their entire Anhui town. With the development of Horrendal, many towns and towns below followed the reform. Anhui town attracted investment and engaged in real estate construction, and as a gangster Chen Guzi took the opportunity to contract earthwork and made a fortune all of a sudden. Now Chen Guzi is cooperating with the developers to demolish and relocate. As long as the developers can't talk about the place, Chen Guzi will take people there, and even beat and scolded people to sign the agreement. Slowly, people in Anhui town are afraid of this. Chen Guzi. This Chen Guzi fell in love with Chen Yingxia, who was in high school, and found the school directly. The principal was so frightened that he expelled Chen Yingxia, and Chen Guzi threatened Chen Yingxia with Chen Yingxia's parents. Chen Yingxia had no choice but to agree to marry him. For this reason, Chen Guzi estimated the house of Chen Yingxia's house at 1 million when estimating the demolition and relocation, and other families in the entire Chenjia village also valued a little more. In this way, the entire Chenjia village was happy and regarded Chen Guzi as a benefactor, but no one knows the suffering of Chen Yingxia. Just damn! David gritted his teeth, his eyes were full of killing intent. If Chen Guzi wants to marry a girl from someone else's family, David will give up. After all, there are too many such things. In many places, small gangsters cooperate with developers to bully the common people. David can't control it, and he is not the savior. But now this Chen Guzi actually hit Chen Yingxia with his idea, David would not agree. Brother David, don't be impulsive, it's like this, I've already seen it, then Chen Guzi has a group of people, and I heard that he still has contact with the underground emperor in Horrendal, those people are all it's killing people without blinking an eye, I don't want you to take risks for me. Seeing David's angry look, Chen Yingxia hurriedly persuaded him. You mean Lin Tianhu? David asked. Chen Yingxia thought for a while, it seems to be called a tiger, I just heard that Chen Guzi mentioned it occasionally. Yingxia, since you don't want to get married, leave this to me, and I'll handle it for you. When that time comes, I'll find you a school in Horindal. Go to school well, and you can't be without culture. David said to Chen Yingxia. Brother David, you. Yingxia, trust your brother, he can handle it well, don't worry. Before Chen Yingxia finished speaking, Sonia took Chen Yingxia's hand and said. Yingxia was not talking, but she did not report any hope, she had already accepted her fate. After a while, it was getting dark outside, and Barbara also came back. David, get ready, go out to dinner with your second aunt's family in a while, and welcome the object of Xia as a treat. Barbara said to David. Is that Chen Guzi? David asked. Barbara was stunned for a moment, but she quickly reacted and said, then Chen Guzi is not ordinary now, he is a big boss. You can't call Chen Guzi when you meet him, it's rude. What if I don't call him Chen Guzi? When I meet him, I want to. Auntie, you go and tell my mother, we'll go there right away. Before David finished speaking, Chen Yingxia hurriedly said to Barbara. Well, hurry up, don't make people wait. Barbara left after her speaking. Barbara walked back, Chen Yingxia looked at David and said, Brother, my parents and auntie don't know. I always said that I am willing to save them from worrying. David looked at Chen Yingxia so sensible at a young age, and touched Chen Yingxia's head with pity in his eyes. Yingxia, don't worry, from now on, no one will force you to do things you don't like, brother now, no one dares. David and the others drove to Chen Yingxia's house. At this time, at the door of Chen Yingxia's house, a Toyota Domineering was parked there. In front of the car was a man wearing a gold chain, a gold ring on his hand, and a cigarette in his mouth, following David. What are the parents and Chen Yingxia's parents chatting about? David saw at a glance that this guy was Chen Guzi, with murderous intent flashing in his eyes. Brother, don't be impulsive, I beg you. Chen Yingxia seemed to sense the killing intent of David, and followed David with a face of prayer. Seeing Chen Yingxia like that, David nodded. A few people got out of the car and walked over. Chen Guzi saw David at a glance, and grinned. David, you have been in prison for 3 years, why are you still looking weak? Follow me, you with the experience of being in prison, you can build up your prestige. David gave Chen Guzi a cold look, no interest. When Chen Guzi saw David's attitude, his face turned cold, but when he saw Sonia beside David, a smile instantly appeared on his originally indifferent face, and his eyes glanced back and forth on Sonia's body unscrupulously, which made Sonia simply disgusting. Miss, my name is Chen Go, nice to meet you. Chen Guzi pretended to be a very gentleman, stretched out his hand with a few gold rings and said. Sonia gave Chen Guzi a cold look without saying a word. This is brother David's girlfriend, Sonia. Seeing this, Chen Yingxia said hurriedly for fear that Chen Guzi would be angry. Chen Guzi wasn't angry either, he just patted David's shoulder with a smile and said, I really underestimate you kid. Just after you got out of prison, you climbed up a little rich woman, you have the ability. When Chen Guzi said this, he didn't hide it at all, and his voice was so loud that everyone could hear it. Let's go, or we'll have nowhere. Chen Yingxia hurriedly stepped forward and pulled Chen Guzi to go to the restaurant. If they were chatting, they might start a fight. How could there be no place? In the whole town of Anhui, wherever I go to eat, he must have a place. Chen Guzi took Chen Yingxia's hand and went directly to his domineering car. Chen Yingxia winked at David desperately, with a pleading look on her face. She was really afraid that David would have a conflict with Chen Guzi. Soon, a few people arrived in the town. With the development of these years, Anhui town is also prosperous. There are many restaurants on both sides of the road. Chen Guzi took David and the others to a 5-story hotel. After getting off the bus, Chen Guzi pointed to the restaurant and said, This is the largest restaurant in Anhui town, and I own shares. When Chen Guzi spoke, his face was full of pride. Sonia glanced at the hotel, covered her mouth and secretly smiled, and then said in David's ear, "It's not as big as my hotel, so it's worth showing off." David smiled without saying a word. He wanted to see how arrogant Chen Guzi could be. Several people walked into the hotel lobby. After seeing Chen Guzi, a cashier immediately ran over and said flatteringly, "Brother Go is here. Little Li, prepare the private room number 1 for me, let's go to dinner." Chen Guzi said proudly. The cashier suddenly looked embarrassed. "Brother Go, there is someone eating in the private room number 1. If you notify us in advance, we may go out." Snapped. Then Chen Guzi slapped the cashier directly and stared, "Do I need to give advance notice to eat? Recognize the person in the private room number 1 and drive away. Do you still need me to teach you about this? Do you want to?" Done. The cashier was slapped, and suddenly cried aggrieved, covering half of his face with one hand, with horror in his eyes. "Chen Go, let's just find a room." Seeing the cashier like that, Chen Yingxia couldn't bear it, so she said to Chen Guzi, "That's okay, I'm taking my future parents-in-law for dinner, and I must have a private room no 1. Chen Guzi wanted to show off in front of David and the others. "Brother Dog, no 1. The guests in the private room on number 1 can't be driven away," the cashier said softly. "SHT? Who can't drive them away? Do you want me to personally drive them away?" Chen Guzi glared at the cashier, reached out and wanted to call again, but was stopped by Chen Yingxia. The cashier was so frightened that he stepped back and said with a trembling body, "Brother Go, it's Manager Kui who was drinking in the private room no 1. The cashier's words caused Chen Guzi's body to tremble slightly, and the expression on his face changed obviously. "Manager Kui is here for dinner? You fucking didn't tell me in advance. The money for the number 1 private room can't be counted, it's all charged to my account. Go and free the number 2 private room for me." It can be seen that Chen Guzi is very jealous of this Manager Kui. The cashier nodded and arranged for the waiter to drive away the second guest. Soon, I heard a few people coming downstairs swearing, all with big arms and round waists. "Damn, what a broken restaurant, we drove people away before we finished eating, don't you want to do it?" "Yes, I smashed the restaurant for you. Today, I want to see who the fkook is so big." Several big men with big arms and round waists were flushed, and they scolded as they walked. The waiter could only keep smiling. But when they walked to the lobby, a few people were stunned when they saw Chen Guzi, then their expressions changed, and they said to Chen Guzi, "Brother Guzi, paralyzed, Lao Tzu is so arrogant, let you all get out of here, okay?" Chen Guzi stepped forward cursingly and kicked a few of them. Several of them bowed their heads and no one dared to speak. Seeing that several people were honest, Chen Guzi waved his hand, "Get the H3LL out of me." If a few people were granted amnesty, they hurriedly ran away. The waiter led Chen Guzi and David upstairs. After sitting down, Chen Guzi put the menu on the table. "I'll treat you today, you can order whatever you want. Brother David, sister-in-law, it's your first time here, let's see what you like to eat, and order whatever you want." Chen Yingxia put the menu in front of David and Sonia. "Yes, David, you need more. You don't have to save me money. You have suffered in prison for 3 years. Come out and make up for it." Chen Guzi shook the big golden watch in his hand and said.